On this episode, we feature CEO and founder of Daily Shifts, an online company dedicated to transformation of the mind, body, and soul. Number one best-selling author of Holy Shit, We're Alive. I'd like to welcome Doug Cartwright to the show. How you doing, Doug?
Dylan, great to be here. I'm doing well.
Excellent, man. Hey, thanks for joining the show today. Thanks for taking the time out to do this. I know you're a busy guy. I think, we talked briefly off air about, kind of some of the things that I think some of the things that you're doing, I'm not quite sure, but I think you're going to get into some really good things that's maybe helping some people, and talk a little bit about your book. That's an interesting title for the book.
Yeah, the title that came to me, and we'll get into it, but when I was in my second night of doing ayahuasca ever, I had a really profound experience where I basically felt like I was reborn, and got to experience what it was to be human for the first time again. And I had this astonishing moment where I leaned up off my mat and I was like, holy shit, this is what it feels like to be alive. And which sparked now the title of the book, Holy Shit, We're Alive.
That's awesome, man. And I've had my battles, in at least in my younger days, with substance abuse and things like that. And I cleared a lot of that up, but I never had the experience of using psychedelics or even the want to use psychedelics. It wasn't even until, going through this podcast and interviewing people, the topic kept coming up, and I actually was able to interview an expert in psychedelics, maybe even similar to yourself. They kind of pushed me to, experiment. And I've had some amazing journeys myself. So there's some interesting things. I kind of can't wait to get your take on, what you think, and, some of your experiences. You talk about, shifts in life perspective. How did yours shift? Can you maybe give us a little bit of backstory to who, how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. Are you in Utah as well?
No, I'm in Ohio.
Ohio, okay. For some reason, I thought you were in Utah. But anyways, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. And when I tell people that, what's usually the next question? Well, did you grow up Mormon? And the answer is yes, I did. And so I was raised in a bubble. And when you're raised in a bubble, you don't realize you're raised in a bubble, because that's just how life is. And so I grew up on the East Bench of Salt Lake City, so upper middle class. Everyone in my neighborhood and surroundings was white. Everyone, majority of the people were Mormon, and majority of the people voted Republican. And that was just the area I grew up in. And not that any of these things are right or wrong or good or bad. It's just that was my whole world. And especially in the Mormon church, your whole life is basically kind of outlined for you. When you're very young in church, you're taught, the church answers the very difficult questions for you, as in, where was I before I was born? Did I have consciousness before I was born? What's the purpose of life? And what happens when I die? And all of those are answered for you. And the roadmap of how to get to heaven is there too. So it's very black and white. It's very, do this, don't do that. Abstain from alcohol, abstain from premarital sex, follow the commandments of Christ, pay your tithing, go to church on Sunday. So there's never an opportunity when you're raised in that environment to think critically, because all the difficult decisions are made for you. And so it leaks over into personal life as well. So it's, and this is this part's more broad, but it's go to school, get good grades so you can get into college, then get a good job, then find a partner, then buy the house, then get the car, then go on your vacation. So growing up, everything, I never had to think critically. And so I went through the routine, I went through the roles, and did everything that quote unquote I was supposed to do. I was captain of the football team in high school. I was student body vice president. I had good grades. I was kind of seen as a outstanding citizen in my community, and following the rules exactly. And the first time where life didn't go according to plan, right, was when I turned 19. And in the Mormon faith, they have this coming of age experience where you go on a service mission, where you become an elder, a missionary. I don't know if you've seen like the Book of Mormon musical, but it kind of is a and makes fun of that whole experience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I was called to be a missionary, and it's this really big idea, big experience where you get called to other part of the world, and for 2 years you proselyte and try and convert people to Mormonism. And it's a really big deal because you're so immersed in the experience. You're not allowed to call home, you're not allowed to watch TV, listen to music, email. It's your 24/7 missionary. And before you go, there's kind of an application process and a standard of worthiness you're supposed to abide by to make sure that you're pure in a sense. So no sex, no girls, no porn, no drugs, anything for almost a year before you go, so that your spirit is pure, you may say. And before I left, I got my mission call to Auckland, New Zealand, which is amazing. It's totally random, and I got New Zealand, and I was so stoked, so amped. And I had my goodbye party, and I had my farewell speech, and I checked out of college, and I had my bags packed, and this 2 years was starting, and I had a girlfriend before I left. And the night before I left, I went to go say goodbye to her. And of course, being 18 years old and full of testosterone and emotions, we became intimate and we broke one of the rules. But at that point, I was leaving the next morning, and I couldn't go back on everything I had done. I was too far down the rabbit hole to pull back. And so I kind of swept it under the rug. I didn't tell anyone, and then went out onto my Mormon mission. And for 9 months, I pretended like it didn't happen. But being in that environment of feeling like God is watching you, I always had this feeling like, oh, God knows my secret. God knows that I'm not quote unquote worthy to be here. And after 9 months of being on my mission, the guilt and the shame of that built up so much that I finally confessed to the mission president. And my consequences of confessing was that I actually got kicked off of my mission early. They sent me home.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And that's a kind of a big deal in the community. So now I go back to my community in Utah, and everyone knows that I'm supposed to be on my mission, and everyone knows that I'm home. And so the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment of not being a good missionary is now weighing on me. And that was kind of the first time in my life where it was like, whoa, life isn't unfolding the way I thought it was supposed to. And everyone listening to this has those moments in life where it's like, okay, I have plans for life to unfold this way, but you can't predict the path, and life will throw a curveball. And that was kind of the first curveball where I felt like I was kind of outcasted, like I'd done something wrong, that I was bad, that God was mad at me. And that really was the tipping point of this entire journey that led down the way. But that was the first moment where I had done bad by God.
Wow, that's unfortunate. That probably created a lot of feelings of shame and guilt, I would think.
Yeah,
Maybe even perhaps hard on yourself, but also, like you said, the whole community looking at you differently.
yeah, and what's interesting is that it's a perfect dynamic, because as men, um, very few of us, as we're raised, we're not taught how to process our emotions. We're not taught how to deal with uncomfortable situations and unpleasant experiences internally, because we need to be tough, we need to be strong, we need to be I was the captain of the football team, so I needed to be the strong guy, right? I was tough guy. So I'm dealing with shame and guilt, and I didn't even know that I was dealing with shame and guilt because I didn't have the tools to identify those experiences going on internally. And so what happens when we don't deal with these emotions is we just cover them up, and we press them down, and we don't deal with them, and they kind of just sit and fester. And this is when like this big festering of emotions began to sit, was about that time.
And then from there, where did you go from there?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that time was right when I got home, and God or the universe, whatever your word is, I use the word universe. The universe is very sneaky. It's very interesting, because right when I got home, I was supposed to have a year and 3 months left still in my Mormon mission. My dad gets diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, basically gets a death sentence. And so he ended up passing away 15 months later. But I was able to spend quality time with him before he passed away. So I'm just so grateful for that. And 15 months then later, My dad's in hospice care. The colon cancer catches up to him. He begins to get really sick. We have in-home hospice, and I'll never forget one night. It was right before he passed away. My mother was consoling me, and we were sitting on the stairs outside his door, and she put her arm around me, and I remember feeling this immense emotions of grief and despair and sadness and frustration and confusion start to come out, and I start to sob uncontrollably for about 3 seconds, because once again, my mind takes over, right? Our mind tends to take over our emotions. Our mind will think our way out of unpleasant emotions. And immediately I go again to be the strong guy for mom, be tough, men don't cry. And then again, I push these emotions down even further and further. And my father ended up passing away about 24 hours later, which is a really difficult experience. It was one of those moments that you always think, I never thought this would happen to me until it does. And so now I'm this 21-year-old kid who's been kicked out of church. I've just lost my father. I don't know how to process my emotions. And there's a lot of unpleasant experiences happening internally. So the next thing I do is I want to distract myself from dealing with these emotions. And my thought process was, okay, my community has outcasted me because I got sent home from my mission. God doesn't love me. My dad died, and I don't know how to deal with this emotion. How can I earn my way back into being seen in a positive light in my family and friends? This is all subconscious thoughts. So I thought, oh, I'll go make a bunch of money. And around this time, I got recruited to work in a sales position that was 100% commission based. So no salary. It was basically unlimited earning potential. And around this time, I got incredibly obsessed and mastering door-to-door sales. And I found an incredible company that was on the up and up of technology, selling smart home services. So from your iPhone, lock your doors, video cameras. It's very common now, but in 2012, they were the first company to do this. And so I attached myself to this company and became absolutely obsessed with leadership and recruiting and managing, and would be up on YouTube till 3 a.m. practicing my sales pitch. And I learned how to make a ton of money. And by the time I was 24, I'd made $1 million. And with that money,
Wow.
yeah, it was an incredible experience. And with that money, what I was trying to do was use something outside of me, whether that was cars, trips, sporting events, clothes, to fix my internal problem. And I'm not the first to say this, I'm not the first to say, material things don't make you happy. It's not, we've all got, a lot of people have talked about that, but I went and learned that the hard way. And I was going to sporting events. I was at the Super Bowl. I was at the NBA Finals. I would spend, $5,000 to $10,000 at the club, like just ripping through my money, hoping to feel something. And along my journey of kind of traveling first class seats and sitting in box suites at the Super Bowl, every now and then in like a hotel lobby, I would bump into somebody that seemed like they were in on a secret. They were incredibly happy and just glowing and seemed like a magnet, and they had no cares, but they were also wildly successful and had deep, meaningful relationships. And I would see people like this, and I would literally in my head think, what do you know that I don't know? Like, you're in on a secret. Like, I'm doing all the things. I'm checking the boxes. I have a good job. I'm making lots of money. I'm traveling. I'm going to sporting events. I'm dating pretty girls. I drive a $100,000 car. Like, I'm doing the things. Why do you seem happy and I don't? And this was actually a scary time in my life, because my mentors at the time, the advice I was getting to them, because I was bringing them this problem, like, hey, like, I'm not feeling aligned. And like, hey, go make more money. And I remember thinking, like, I don't think an extra $200,000, $300,000 a year is going to make that much of a difference. Like, I already have plenty. And so for about 3 years, I went through this kind of this lulled loss, just like a lost soul. and didn't have any direction of where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And I kind of peaked out. And then when I was 27 in the year 2017, everything changed overnight. And a couple of weird things started happening in my life. I was kind of looking at another career potentially, but I remember thinking, okay, the church I grew up in, I had left the Mormon church at this point, didn't work. I hadn't dealt with the grief of my father. I felt unfulfilled at work, and I didn't know where to go for answers. And so I remember thinking, you know what? I'm just going to give the woo woo world, the spirituality world, I'm going to give it a shot. Like I have nothing to lose. So I started dabbling in meditation. I started dabbling into yoga. And I remember kind of feeling called to it. And I read a book by Jin Sero called You Are a Badass. And that book, kind of changed perspective of me. And it was in a very lighthearted, approachable way, talked about, following the synchronicities of the universe and trusting your gut and intuition. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Let's see what happens. And for those that want the full story, it gets really, really weird and crazy. I feel like I lived in a movie for a while. And in my book, Holy Shit, We're Alive, I detail it out really intensely. It's a really fun journey. But as I'm kind of going through this journey of yoga and meditation and kind of dabbling into therapy, I came across a book called Stealing Fire, which is by Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. And it talks about flow state, like how to get into the zone. So whether you're, Michael Jordan when he's just in the zone, or you're a swimmer or an artist or a musician or a surfer, and just things are just flowing really easily. And, everyone's has had a moment of flow state in their life. And so I picked up this book thinking, okay, how can this help me be a better performer in my business? And it gets to a part in the book where they talk about psychedelic compounds. And at this point in my life, I was raised in Utah. I was conservative. I was kind of like a sales bro. In my world, every drug was basically meth. And if you did it one time, you'd be addicted for life, and then you'd be homeless and die. Like that was the whole blanket of compounds. Like there was no, mind, healthy mind altering substance. That everything was just really, really bad. Everything. And I remember reading this part of the book, and in that book, they talk about 4 compounds. They talk about MDMA, they talk about LSD, they talk about psilocybin, and they talk about DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca. And I remember reading this book, and my mind is blown. And they talk about the incredible, powerful studies that psychedelics are being studied in regards to depression and anxiety. And these research papers are have astounding evidence in case for the healing powers of psychedelics. And it was like reading a new language for me. It was like this whole new world that opened up for me. And I remember reading it the first time, feeling like deeply in my soul, feeling called to this work. And I remember thinking I have to try this. I have to see what's around this corner. And coincidentally, 2 weeks later after reading this book, I'm at a party and I see a high school friend who I haven't seen in 10 years. And he comes up to me and approaches me. He's like, hey, hope you're doing good. He's like, oh, I'm not sure if you're interested, but we have some MDMA here. And I was like, no shit. I've never been offered a hard substance in my life other than marijuana. And 2 weeks after reading this, here it is. I remember thinking, whoa, I have to try this.
It's a synchronicity.
The synchronicity thing's insane, right? It's just,
yeah.
It was too crazy. And I remember feeling like, holy shit, I have to try this. And so I take this MDMA, and for the MDMA, it's a very beautiful experience. 30 minutes in after I partake, I have a kind of a typical normal MDMA experience where I come up and I feel really open and I feel connected, and the music sounds amazing, and I just love everybody. And probably for the first hour of the experience on the come up, it was really good, and pretty typical MDMA and heart open and just a lot of love, which felt good. But I remember thinking in that experience that I'm like, okay, this is great and amazing, and I feel opened, but this isn't going to change my life. Like this isn't some like deep spiritual transformational experience. And I actually remember my internal dialogue at that time was almost cautionary. I was telling myself, hey, this is great, enjoy the night, but like be careful, slippery slope, you're here, have fun, but kind of wrap it up. And around that time, my buddy came up to me and said, "Hey, come up into the main master bedroom. We'll turn off the lights. We have glow sticks. We'll turn on some EDM music really loud. You're gonna love it." I'm like, "Shit, we're doing drugs. Fine, let's do it." So we're like in this experience, and then someone kind of like comes into the bedroom mid experience and turns the lights on. It kind of just throws the vibe off accidentally, and so everyone kind of like scattered out of the room. And I'll never forget. I was laying on the hardwood floor and I had my hands behind my head like this. And I remember thinking, I'm like, there's more here. Like there's another level, layer, like there's something here. And so I get up to stand up to go back into the main kitchen area to join the party. And when I stand up, I have this like, oh shit moment. And my body felt like it was frozen. And I was like, oh, I need help. I need help right now. And I felt like my soul was falling out of my body. And every time I tell this story too, the memory pops up. But I have these old memories when I was a kid, like little tiny 2, 3 years old, start coming back to me. And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, like my life is flashing before my eyes. Like that's a real thing. And I'm like, I've died. I have literally died. And I remember thinking, like, panicking that my friends are gonna have to call my mom and tell her that I died at a party and like all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it was like, woof, and I slapped back into my body. And I remember looking at my hands being like, what just happened? And so I go to the bedroom door to go back in the kitchen. And there aren't human words to describe what happened. But the closest, I'll do my very best, but the closest way I can describe it is I was literally in a higher dimension of life. And it was the most indescribable, unreal experience I've ever seen. Everything looked incredibly way more real than it does now. I could look at people and they had light systems up their body, and I hadn't done any work on Eastern philosophy at this point. I could
So
see
you
people's
were seeing
auras.
their chakras. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's what I would assume it was at the time. Looking back at it now, it makes sense. In the moment, I had no idea what was going on. I had no clue. And I could see people's like they had like a color like breathing off of them.
Their aura or something, huh?
Yeah.
That's
And
so cool.
and I'm seeing this for everyone. And I have two thoughts that happen. First is, holy shit, the hippies were right. Like, damn it, this whole time the hippies were right. And I've made fun of them my whole life, but they get it. And two, since this was my first experience, I believe that this is what happens every time you take MDMA. So I'm like, why doesn't people talk about this other dimension? Like, was this like big kept secret in the MDMA world that no one talks about? And I remember thinking, like, why doesn't anyone ever talk? This is the most indescribable, like I will never be the same. And so I go out onto the balcony of this cabin and I overlook the lake and I see the earth's soul breathing off the lake. And I'm like, oh, Mother Earth, I get it. It's like an actual living entity. Like, oh, I've never understood that before. And I walk back in, and all of a sudden, like this beam of light, like I can't even describe it, but it socks me on the top of the head. And it's the love of the creator. I remember thinking, like, oh, it's not a man in a beard in a robe. It's like this universal energy that is intertwined in every living thing. And it just fully encompasses me. And my initial thought was realizing I didn't need to earn it, that there wasn't a checklist of have you been a good boy, but it was an indescribable, overwhelming love that I have access to all the time. And it was the first time I've ever felt the love of creation or God. And it was the most blissful, indescribable, infinite love experience I had in my life, still to this day. And as that kind of faded and I moved on to like this experience, I started to realize I was having a very different experience than other people. And I decided to go off on my own. And I go lay down upstairs on the couch. And then I start hallucinating even more. And then I actually then I start having like an actual hallucination vision. And I see, and I'm not saying this is capital T true, that I mean, this is just what happened to me and the way I interpret it. But I saw, kind of what happened before we are born and what happened after we die. And the way I interpret it was almost like this massive general's tent. And inside this tent is like the pure consciousness of all the souls and humans that we'll interact with. And there's this incredible, like, contractual agreement where it was like, okay, at this point you'll meet this person and they'll teach you this, and then at this point you'll meet this person and they'll teach you this. And you kind of very intentionally create the entire experience of your life in a game plan. And then it's like, okay, ready, break, and then you actually go out and live it. And afterwards there's this moment of reconciliation, and it's not judgment, it's not like good or bad, it's just like, hey, let's analyze the experience that was just had and break it down to kind of pull the data out of it. In a sense, like I said, there wasn't this good or bad or you've been right or wrong experience. It was just an analysis of the experience. And then I remember being in this massive dome with tons of stars, and there was a spirit guide there with me at the time, and I remember not being scared of him. And keep in mind, this is the first time I've ever done drugs in my life, and the spirit guide was showing all the stars, and I remember saying to him, like, hey, like, there's so many stars in the sky. And he's like, no, those aren't stars. Those are other experiences that you have once you finish Earth that aren't human. And I'm like, whoa. And at this point in my life, I thought that reincarnation was something the hippies made up, that when you die, you'll become a flower. I never once thought about multiple human lives.
Well, that's the thing about this experience that you're describing. Like you said, you weren't of the woo woo or even had knowledge of things like, spirit guides, or that you're reincarnated and you're being shown this. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, first experience.
And
And so,
that's just real quick, you can continue your story, but that's what's crazy about psychedelics. Like, not only can they be like earth shattering, like in a sense of like just completely changing how you view things, but also it seems that there's like an intelligence behind them.
absolutely, there was something grander, infinitely more wise, understanding, and loving behind the architect of my experience. That's completely inexplainable. That it makes, and there's no human word to even give it any justice of what's behind the experience. Our human minds are limited in capacity of understanding this. And having this experience, and you can dive in, and I'll cut some out, if those that really want to get the whole story can read the book. But that experience, still to this day, I've never been the same since. And coming out of that completely changed the way I look at everything, and my entire mind is different. And that experience was so profound, and it is a very untypical MDMA experience. I've done MDMA multiple times since, and I haven't had it even remotely close to that type of experience. But that experience was so intense that my curiosity was piqued, that eventually led me to work with psilocybin, and then eventually led me to work with ayahuasca. And I've done 9 ayahuasca sessions since that, and have done a lot of my deep healing since then. My deep healing in regards to the shame and guilt from my mission, healing my sexual abuse as a kid, healing the death and passing of my father, healing my body image issues, healing the heartbreak from past lovers. And it was all teed off by that first psychedelic experience.
Yeah, I definitely think that psychedelics can be healing. It's crazy to me that you just that there's like a almost like, at least for me, there's like a reset of depression. Like when you have like, if you're maybe going through a rough patch in your life and you have a experience, it's almost like, for me, it's like almost like a complete reset. Like you just, and it's quick too. It's not, it's not 6 months of therapy sessions to deal with your depression. It's,
One
almost,
session.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's what's so profound about this medicine. And I mean, I always, when I talk about it, mentioned that there are risks. Like psychedelics are not for everyone. And especially if you have any family history of bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, they're completely off the table. I've seen people have really difficult experiences in the medicine space that cause lasting damage mentally. But if you do feel called to the work, it can be done in safe setting with intention, and can be very, very profound. And the psychedelic experience is completely unexplainable. Like, actually, the experience, you can't describe it. And it has a way of showing you blind spots in your life that are blocking you, and shows you how to remove those blockages. And on that note, I would say that psychedelics don't do the work for you, but they show you how to do the work. It's not a magic bullet where it'll solve your problem, but it'll give you really key insights and information that you may be missing to help unlock and uncover, the healing you're seeking.
Yeah, it's like a teacher, and
Oh
like
yeah.
like you said, it almost pulls exactly what you need to work on to the surface, and kind of puts it in your face and says, "Here it is."
Yeah, and you can't hide from it.
Yeah.
That thing that you've been avoiding, that thing in your closet that we don't talk about, those intense experiences, it's a truth serum while also showing you what you need to work on. And if you resist looking at it, it will punish you in a way to where it'll force you to look at it. And so, excuse me, the psychedelic experience is really beautiful. And I think, it's really exciting to see the movement in the space. And as it starts to get more opened up to legalization, it's going to be very powerful for a lot of people. And I would just, double down and saying, if you've never had a psychedelic experience before, I would not dive in by yourself. Excuse me. I would take care of take care of setting, be in a safe place with someone you love and be open to and trust. And you want to mitigate as much risk as possible by doing it in a safe environment with the right intention to heal. And if you can take care of some of those experiences, your surroundings and your intention and the mood, it can usually tee you up to have a very beautiful, safe experience that can be very healing and open up a lot of doors for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's important, especially in terms of like just having the right mindset, or being in the right space in your head when you partake in an experience.
Yeah, like I said, the only experience I had that was incredibly, one of the hardest experiences of my entire life was in this psychedelic experience. And I went into it really confused and flustered and not in a good headspace, and was kind of hoping it would solve the problem. And I was punished for that. The most beautiful, loving psychedelic experience I've had is when I've gone in with really clear intentions, feeling really good internally, feeling really happy with where I was in my life. Um, and your mindset going into the experience dictates a major part of how your experience will be.
And now you said you dab with DMT, psilocybin. What are the differences between that and ayahuasca? Is because I've never had the ayahuasca experience, but
Yeah, the ayahuasca experience is very intense. Completely indescribable. Um, Ayahuasca, the active ingredient is DMT inside of ayahuasca. If you smoke DMT, it's about a 15 to 30-minute experience. It's very intense. Um, and I actually don't recommend it for people unless you are having severe depression, severe anxiety, severe alcoholism or substance abuse. If you're kind of just curious about it, I don't recommend it, because I've seen it do damage in the sense of that it knocks people off, because it is so intense that people kind of lose grip of reality in a sense, because it is so astonishing that it can be kind of an intense blast off. And like I said, I've actually seen it do damage to people. I only would recommend that. And like I said, I'm no doctor or professional by any means, so seek professional help. Don't take my word for it. But in my experience, DMT should be saved for people on a severe, need severe help. Ayahuasca is really beautiful in the sense that it's a very intense journey. 6 to 8 hours. It's a tea, psychedelic tea. You drink it, and it's a lot more intense than mushrooms. The ayahuasca plant is its own entity. I know this sounds weird to people that never had this experience, but you actually communicate with the plant in your experience. And it takes you, ayahuasca is very healing. It takes you very, very deep into your subconscious. I was able to heal my sexual abuse. I was actually sexually molested when I was 6. And I completely put that deep down in the closet and never dealt with it. And then working with ayahuasca, I was able to bring a lot of that information back to the surface. And on top of that, integrating that with a professional therapist afterwards really helped me heal that experience. And so psilocybin is the mushroom, and it's a great place to start. It's overall pretty safe. Sorry, I've got some in my throat. Psilocybin is actually incredibly safe. It's been proven that small doses of psilocybin can be really harmless. And like I said, taking care of the set and setting, I always would recommend people starting with psilocybin, a small dose of psilocybin, just to kind of get an idea of what the experience may be like before going, 4 or 5 grams and have more of a healing experience. And MDMA is probably the most gentle of the psychedelics. Some people actually don't classify MDMA as a psychedelic, but it is the gentlest of all of them. It's a dopamine and serotonin release, so it actually creates feelings of happiness and safety and connection. So it's a good place to start to have a compound that alters consciousness. And so it kind of just depends on what you're looking for, but those are kind of those are the 4. And then LSD, I've worked with LSD as well, and all of them kind of have their own different experience. But I think as time goes on and as we kind of open up to the idea of working with psychedelics, I think there's going to be a lot of healing for a lot of people in the future.
That's beautiful, man. What is your sense of time on those things? Because to me, like, time just, it seems so different. And like, you were mentioning earlier that like a lot of things, it almost feels real or realer than reality itself when you're on a journey. But like, my sense of time kind of gets distorted, and it almost seems way longer than it actually is.
Yeah, I actually had an experience the first time I ever smoked 5-MeO DMT, which is one of the most probably the most powerful psychedelic in the world. I blasted through this cannon, and Doug, my humanness, never existed. I had no memory or experiences ever being Doug, and my consciousness was a atom molecule in a drop of water in an infinite ocean, and it dropped into the ocean and merged with consciousness, and time had never existed. And I was able to experience the allness and the everythingness of everything that ever happened, ever will happen, all simultaneously happening at the same time. And time didn't exist in that experience. And to try and explain it is impossible, because if you've never had the experience, you've only had the experience of working on a linear timetable. And to have that taken away, there's nothing I could do or say or show you to even give you a comprehension of what that's like until you have that experience. But yeah, the whole timetable experience, having that removed in a psychedelic experience is fascinating, because then when you come back and kind of back into your body and you regain your consciousness, you begin to question a lot of things. And you just look at the world completely different. And for me, what it did, okay, well, what's the point of that? Well, if I believe that time is just kind of an illusion and isn't the laws of time and space differ where you are in the universe, which has been proven, it took away almost this angsty uh, feeling that I had to accomplish a lot in my life, that I needed to achieve something beyond me, to leave a legacy of some sort, and really took that pressure away from me, which resulted in actually me producing more deeper, meaningful work, which was interesting because you think if I take the pressure away of having to perform, that I would actually slow down my work. But when you take away the pressure to perform, my work got more meaningful because I could do it at a slower, more intentional, healthy pace, which produced deeper work. So it was kind of counterintuitive. But that whole experience of time going away, it's a tricky thing because we can have this conversation, but there's no words either of us could come up with that would accurately describe that experience.
That's amazing. Simply amazing. What are some of the goals for your book? I mean, obviously it's to share your story with people, but what are you after with your book?
Yeah, I think, I really suffered in my 20s. I fell victim to what I term the success void. And in my 20s, if I were to give you a resume of my life, it would look successful, right? Made money, had cars, dating pretty women, traveling, sporting events, but there was this deep inner void. And, after doing my kind of sabbatical that I share in the book, I learned the beauty of living the life I'm actually living rather than fighting life, trying to live the life I think I'm supposed to be living. And the intention with the book and sharing this is sharing my story and hopefully to persuade others and give them insights and ideas on life that help them learn to love themselves and to learn to love life and to build a relationship with something bigger than them, whether that's a God or soul or divine or the universe. And once you really learn to trust and build that relationship with the universe, it will guide you. And if you can surrender to the flow of life, life turns out better than you can imagine. And so the end result from this book is I hope people learn to love themselves and learn to love the life they're actually living.
That's a beautiful message. The process of writing a book, is there another one on the table potentially?
It's funny, you're I think the fourth person to ask me that this week. So I think the universe is teeing me up for a number two. Um, I have some life experience I need to live first, um, before it gets there. But when people would ask me that in the past, I'd be like, yeah, we'll see. But being the fourth person to ask me that this week, I think, yeah, I think there's definitely be a book number two.
That's cool, man. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Um, what do you know about, like, as far as the potential for like psychedelics maybe like transforming or changing like the neural pathways and how we connect with neurons?
Yeah, I think it's been proven that, especially working with ayahuasca, it changes the direction of neural pathways in your mind. Um, and I, what was really fascinating is before my first ayahuasca session, I went and got an fMRI scan on my brain, the night before, and did a full brain scan. And they read all my waves, my alpha waves, delta waves, theta waves, gamma rays that my brain was producing. And the day after 3 nights of ayahuasca, I went and did it again. And my therapist at the time was looking at the two. Excuse me, I did not do an fMRI. I did neurofeedback. I did a neurofeedback scan. And the therapist at the time was looking at the two reports and was like, I can't believe this is the same brain. He said, what you did in 3 days, it would take me 20 years of neurofeedback to get these types of results. And she was absolutely blown away. And so I think the science and the data is there that it's, these compounds actually do change the neural pathways in your mind. And I don't know if you've seen that image of a brain on psilocybin, and all of those neural pathways are connecting, all over the place, and just opens up so many new ideas. And and connects dots in your life, which is, which is really the healing part of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it could be, it's just a beautiful experience, man. Do you like recommend, I mean, you talk about, the right setting and all those things, and that is very important. But like when it comes to ayahuasca, like you recommend like a ceremonial type shaman experience that's led, or I mean, you would want to do something like that rather than just, casual use of a substance, correct?
Yeah, especially with ayahuasca, that absolutely needs to be done in a ceremonial setting. That compound is very profound and very intense, and you will need someone there to help guide you. I actually recommend Rhythmia in Costa Rica. I've had multiple friends go to Rhythmia and have beautiful experiences where it's legal there. Unfortunately, working with ayahuasca in the States is still illegal, but in Costa Rica and Peru, it's legalized there, and you can have very safe experiences in those countries. And like I said, the one I would recommend would be Rhythmia in Costa Rica.
As far as the daily shifts is concerned, what is the goal of that? And kind of what, give us a little bit of oversight of what that is.
Yeah, the Daily Shifts is a mindfulness app designed for busy people. And so as I kind of went on this journey coming from a very type A lifestyle, I was like sales guy, leadership guy, and then kind of going into this more of this mindfulness approach, I realized that there's a lot of amazing tools and techniques that I learned on this journey that will help me stay centered, And so I built this app designed intentionally with people that are really busy. So in the app, there's really easy breathing techniques, meditations that are 5 minutes or less, gratitude practice, simple goal setting, and then sleep, eat, and hydration tracking. These are all tools and habits that, when practiced consistently, bring really, really strong, beautiful results of well-being. And so, all the Daily Shifts is a very simple and effective way to shift yourself back to center throughout the day.
That I could see that being very helpful, especially these days with so many distractions and things that kind of pulling you
Yeah.
in 100 different directions. That's good stuff, man. I listen. I don't want to keep you much longer. I guess what would you say to somebody who was thinking about having an experience, but maybe they're hesitant, but maybe they're in need of some healing. They've tried other options, they've tried other things, they've maybe nothing else is working. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, depending on where you live in the country, I would start with ketamine. Ketamine is legal, and there's a lot of ketamine clinics around the country where you can actually go in and have an experience with a trained professional in a safe setting with safe intention, and it's all legal, and you have help all the way there. I would not, if you've never had an experience, I would not buy something from a friend and take it at home one night, because there's too many variables where things could get off. They could create a really intense experience. And so start with ketamine, and you can find, legal clinics around the country where you can go have an experience, and it's very safe, and it's a great setting and atmosphere for you to do some healing.
Excellent. I think that's great advice. Where can the people find you, find the work that you're doing, and pick up your book?
And the book is #1 bestseller on Amazon. Holy shit, we're alive. That's probably the easiest way to get it on Amazon. And I can be found on Instagram at Doug_Cartwright. And I actually respond to all my DMs. So if you have a question or some feedback in any way, hit me up on Instagram. I would love to chat with anyone.
Awesome. Yeah, that's it. Pick up the book, guys. I know I'm going to. It's going to be a fascinating read. Can't wait. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Dylan.